Hi everyone, it's Brenda back again with another episode of Three Uniques. Today I have on Keltie Maguire. Hi Keltie, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm very well. And you nailed the first and last name.
Okay,
So
good.
thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. So Keltie's a clarity coach and she's living in Munich, Germany, originally from Canada. So Keltie, tell us about what it's like to be a clarity coach.
Yes, well, I have to say, I'm biased, but it's very, very interesting because I effectively use sort of this vehicle of clarity to help people create the kind of business or career and life that they really truly want. To connect with what those deeper desires and wants are, to show people that there is far more possible for them than they often think or believe to be possible. So I find it very interesting. I often joke with my clients that I I like chewing on other people's problems a lot more than my own. So if somebody's feeling stuck, muddled, unclear, there's something they're having trouble thinking through. It's like this juicy problem that I can't wait to get my hands on. Of course, when I was in, and when it still happens that I sometimes feel unclear. When I'm in those shoes, it's not nearly as exciting and fun. So
Okay.
yeah, I really love what I do.
And prior to this, or you may still be doing it now, I'm not too sure, but you had your own jewelry store business or jewelry business. So
Yes.
you've gone the path of being an entrepreneur and what that looks like. And so, what was that transition for you, or why one thing and now this? I'm just sort of curious.
Yeah, of course. Well, I've done, various different things. And so my jewelry business was my first foray into entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
I ran the business for a few years alongside a job that I had. I was working in sales and advertising in Vancouver, where I know you are based,
Hmm.
and went full time with that probably about 3 years before moving to Germany. And it's interesting with people who have creative professions because I feel like not always, but oftentimes their first and foremost love is that creative pursuit that they have. So, first they're a writer, then they're the business owner, first they're the painter. And oftentimes it's like they're almost reluctant to adopt that role of being business owner, being entrepreneur. Whereas for
Right.
me, it was almost like I was looking for some sort of vehicle in which I could have a business because that was really what I wanted to do. That said, I love jewelry, enjoyed aspects of that business for a number of years. But as time went on, I started to realize that day to day, there was less and less that I really enjoyed about it. Certainly coming up with a new collection and doing a launch party and shooting a lookbook with models and a photographer, that was really cool. But when I looked at, writing captions for Instagram about a product or dealing with, I made some stuff in house, but I was working with a manufacturer. So dealing with manufacturing delays and a lot of those smaller pieces and busy work, I was really feeling, I guess, just low and unhappy in that. Um, and yet, when it came time to think about what I would do otherwise, I really felt like there was no other option. It was like I've invested so much time, so much money, so much energy, blood, sweat, tears, love, all that stuff into this business that when I thought about potentially closing it,
Hmm.
or taking it in some sort of new direction. I really couldn't see that path forward. Um, I think I worried about disappointing myself, disappointing other people, feeling like a failure, all those things. And around that time, and this, I would say it was probably a good like 2+ years of quite a bit of upheaval. I was working with a couple of coaches. I was thinking about how I could better work my business in my favor so that I enjoyed it more. My husband and I decided to move to Germany.
Okay.
And so this move to Germany, it provided, I would say, even more stark contrast between the life that I had and the direction that I was moving in and really what I wanted for myself. And as an example, moving to Munich, I saw, hey, I want to have location independence and flexibility to be able to travel. I don't want to imply that you can't run a product based business where you're like physically the one producing or managing product, because there's certainly ways of moving around that. But the way I was doing it, I realized like, this is not going to support the kind of life I want moving forward.
Right.
I was in this new country, meeting new people and having these connections, and really, I guess, wanting to have like further depth and meaning in what I was doing. And while I certainly think that something like jewelry and physical objects have an important place in people's lives, I felt that connection missing. So it made it challenging, but I'm also super grateful for it because when I thought about the kind of future life that I was going to continue to develop and grow, I finally had to come to the conclusion that the business was not was not the thing anymore. And that's when I made the decision to close it.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing that story, that journey with us, because I think a lot of times, and maybe I'm generalizing, and listeners will like follow up with me and let me know if I am. But here's how I sort of see it: is I see people get fixated on a job or a role or a business, and when it doesn't necessarily fit, or they're like they're not feeling that alignment, the idea of possibly closing it and moving to something else causes that anxiousness, right? Like, it's like, and then all those beliefs about like, success, or am I worthy of validity, when really, and then we'll get into this, like when we start talking about your three uniques, is when you start aligning to what makes you unique, it's not so much about something tangible, like a position in a company or a business that you've started. It's more like, I'm living my three uniques, and those will shift and manifest into different ways of being throughout the whole time I'm on this planet, right? So it's like we don't get so fixated on how we're living our three uniques. It's just, where are we living those, and where are we in alignment and congruency with it. So I think your journey is beautiful, because you came to this realization that, if it's not necessarily working for what, but you could still live this amazing life, like doing something else, then choose that path, right?
Yeah,
So
100%. Yeah. And I think for me, one of the questions I asked myself was like, really, what do I want? And I actually realized I wanted everything that I had. I had and continue to have a great relationship with my partner, and great friendships, and relationship with family, and outdoor adventures and travel. I wanted to have even more of that, and not feel sort of encumbered by this business, and to feel like it was this weight I was dragging around. So I totally agree with what you're saying. And the focus or kind of the language I use with my clients when we talk about that is really, we get so fixated on the exact vehicle, that we are sort of moving along in, and whether that be, again, like the job or the business, what have you, and exactly what that is. Am I a copywriter for pet-based businesses? Like, it actually doesn't matter. It does to a degree, right? Like, we want to make sure that that vehicle is in alignment with the kind of life that you want, your values, et cetera. And in my case, it didn't, right? Like, I was like, I want to have so many things that this business is not really in alignment with. But in the sense that that vehicle facilitates and allows certain skills and connections and experiences to come about, it could be so many different things, right? Like, I believe there's like a million things we could do.
yeah.
And that can be constricting for people, but it can also be very freeing to know it doesn't have to look a certain way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I always say this, and I'll say this at the end as we close out, but there's 7.8 billion people on this planet. Somebody needs what you've got. And when you think about like a viable business or a company, it's like, I don't need to work for everybody. I only need to work for maybe a few employers in my lifespan. Or if they're business ideas, like, how many customers do I realistically need? Do I need 7.8 billion? Like, am I designing my business to be that? Or is it like, oh, hey, you know what? I need maybe 20 customers a year, or I need 50 customers a year, or 100. Like, okay, in the span of however long you're going to operate that business, it's not even going to come close to 7.8 billion people.
Hopefully
And
not.
no, exactly,
That's a
right?
lot of people to keep happy.
So you've got lots of room to play in and try and experiment and open and close and shift. So I love that. Well, let's get into your three uniques, because that's why you're here, and I'd love to hear more about it. In addition, I do want to share that if anyone ends up following Keltie after this, like on Instagram, she always posts all these amazing photos of her hikes with her husband and their dog throughout Bavaria, basically, where she's based. And like, I've been to that part of Germany before, and I've hiked through some of the great mountain trails, and it's such it's really, I mean, like, because we're both from BC, but it's like, it's great to be able to see your photos on Instagram. So I encourage people to go check those out after they
Thank you.
listen.
Yeah, it's funny. I always joke. I mean, an engagement's only just one measure, but I get so much amazing engagement and feedback when I post the nature photos. I always laugh because I say, I don't get this much interaction with all of the business stuff, but I think it's, very inspiring to people, and people love seeing those. And I love sharing it, because hiking and spending time in nature with my family is one of the biggest joys in my life. And it's something that I do a lot of. So definitely give me a follow.
Okay, so let's hear your three uniques. How about them?
All right. It was really hard to narrow down to three, because I feel like the way I sort of thought of it is this should be like all encompassing as best as possible, which, as you know, can be challenging. But the three uniques, not brevity, for sure not, My energy, my natural curiosity, and my creative mind.
Okay, so let's talk about energy.
Yeah. Well, we can say that everybody has their unique blend of energy, of course, right? And it's that presence that we have when we show up in a room and just sort of how we are. And for me, it's something that a lot of people reflect back to me that stands out and that has attracted them to me and vice versa. Um, it, I would, I have had people over the years call me a bit cheeky or sassy, lippy in worst cases. Which may not be the way to lead with this example, but there's a playfulness to the energy that I have and that I bring. Certainly, I have a lot of passion and excitement for life and the things that I do, but also for other people. So I would say my energy is quite celebratory. I love seeing other people do well and finding joy and fulfillment in their lives. And I'm grateful for that because I think sometimes we feel like when we see other people, it's easy to just get a bit envious, right? Especially if we feel like it's not something that we have. But when I see other people doing well, feeling fulfilled, whatever area of life, it shows me what's possible for myself. And it also makes me happy that they can have those things that I already have, in the areas in which I have them. And I would say I won't use the word authentic because I think it's probably been a bit overused, but I have an openness and realness that I'm told makes me very easily approachable. I share, this wasn't recorded, but told Brenda before this episode, we can talk about whatever, and we truly can. It doesn't mean I'm going to be able to speak about it eloquently, but I like to share the ups and downs of life. And although I keep things quite optimistic and upbeat, I wouldn't call myself a Pollyanna. I'm also someone who can talk about the tough stuff. So, yeah. That characterizes my energy in a very large nutshell.
And that's the thing too. There's a couple of points in there. One, I think whenever anyone comes on the podcast and I've asked them to share the three uniques, they do say, "Oh, it was really challenging to narrow it down to three." And the reality is, as humans, we're made up of so many different emotions and dynamics and experiences, and like we've talked about, beliefs and skills. And sometimes that can also be overwhelming, right? Which direction do I go in? Should I go to the left? Should I go to the right? Door number one, door number two. And so if we can try and have three that we can go back to as sort of not necessarily always our default, but it's these are tried and true. And whenever I look at my experiences or where I wound up being, it usually aligns with your energy, right? As being the first one that you talked about. And I think the other thing I was going to say, going back to your Instagram feed, if you want some thoughts on that, why people really love the mountain hiking is that probably they want to gravitate to your energy. And maybe you're most alive when you're in nature and you're on a hike. And or you guys have just done a workout because it's there's lots probably of a lot of energy around that. So whatever it is, I think it comes off in your photos on Instagram, but it also comes out in your personality, right? And so people just get naturally drawn to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. And people, when they meet me, so people who know me and then they read my writing or they hear my podcast, I had a friend look over some copy content the other day and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I could hear you saying it because it's exactly how you talk." And vice versa. People who meet me, if they have a call with me, become a client, if they meet me at a party or an event, they say to me, "Wow, you're exactly how you seem." And I'm grateful for that. It's too much work to have these different personas running around. Yeah.
Love it. Okay. And your second unique?
My second unique is my natural curiosity. So this really shows up in different ways. And I have to say, I wasn't super attuned to this until it came time to decide what was next for me once I decided to close my last business. And so I, asked myself a lot of questions and really took stock of my different strengths and the kind of value I could bring and what makes me unique, what sets me apart. And actually, my curiosity is something that my husband pointed out to me. And he said, I seldom see or meet someone who is so curious about other people and the world. He said, "You ask such great questions," which again, I wasn't really aware of, but I think the way I sort of operate and move through the world is, okay, we can look at things and say the world's a hot mess, which in many regards it is. And we can also say the world is exquisitely awesome, which it also is. And so when I meet a person, when I am out and about, walking through Munich, when I'm in the mountains, I stopped with a friend in the English gardens today and there's all these little like chickadees on a bird feeder. It's like, how can you not be curious and think, what kind
Right.
of bird is that? Like, oh, its coloring is actually a bit blue. I thought it was black. And like, I'd really be interested and listen to the song it's making. And, if somebody tells me that they do something for a profession, it's how do I not, if I don't know what that is or what that entails, why would I not want to ask more questions about it? So, um, that is just, I think it's something, it's within me. It maybe is something I mean, we can talk about like where that came from. I'm not actually sure, but I feel like the more I feed it, the
Mhm.
more it grows. Um, and I think that natural curiosity also really ties in for this thirst I have for ideas, both to create my own ideas and to like explore and define different ideas I have, but also to seek them out. And for you and I to have a conversation, certainly we can talk about travel, we can talk about our dogs, but for you and I just to talk about ideas, like, and like kind of, relationships, connection and coaching, that is really what gets me super excited. And again, I think that all ties back to curiosity. Um, and I think with that as well, it you see that in my business as a coach, specifically because I'm really good at helping people connect the dots between things that often seem very disparate in their minds,
Mhm.
and to kind of find that red thread that weaves its way through a person's story or life or experiences. So yeah, I'm grateful for that. It definitely shows up and supports me in a lot of ways.
I love that. So knowing that you were, because you talked about even before you went into the jewelry business, you were in like you were in marketing, branding, advertising. Did you have that same, would you like when you look back on sort of like episodes in your life, like I would obviously natural curiosity around jewelry, intricate designs, working with different stones or metals or um, tools, whatever that would look like. But would you see that in sort of that corporate or that marketing type persona that you would have had in your life?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, if I could go back to like university, I started doing music, but I actually switched into a Bachelor of Arts degree, and I studied psychology. And of course, I'd always been interested in psychology and how do people work, and so I think that's been there for a very long time. And then looking at my corporate work, my last role was in advertising and sale marketing, but really my role was sales. And I worked in previous sales capacities in the past, also doing recruitment of salespeople, which of course is getting to know people very intimately. So um, I think this line of questioning and like constantly getting to that next level and helping people really, figure out what a business's objectives are and how you can help them fulfill those is something that has been trained in me. Like it's definitely, it's a skill that I've sharpened a lot.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Thanks. It's always just interesting too to see how people have developed their uniques over time. And
Yeah.
then your third unique.
My third unique is my creative mind, which in some ways it's funny. I was thinking like it really is intertwined with this curiosity as well. And I think curiosity breeds creativity, and trying to be creative, or well, having creative pursuits requires us to be curious. Um, I it went so of course I had a creative profession with my jewelry design. I love coming up with new jewelry designs. Like I never really felt like I was stagnant for ideas. If anything, it was feeling like I couldn't bring them all to fruition, just based on like the parameters of how much product you can produce and sell, etc. um, I love helping my clients come up with ideas for different possible avenues. I love putting different ideas together, and really just seeing possibilities both for my own life as well as for other people's lives. I also think that creativity really helps me to simplify the complex.
Mhm.
Things that are complex make me actually quite anxious, so I'm always looking at like how can we kind of, while retaining the integrity of whatever it is we're doing or whatever process or whatever thing,
Right.
how can we really minimize that and clarify things. So
I love that. So,
thank you.
and I love the fact that you've shared again how all the three uniques weave in through your life. So, question for you: has there been somebody? Because you mentioned that maybe there's been somebody, or how did you say like develop that natural curiosity? Has there been somebody in your life or a group of people that have been like mentors, coaches, advisors that have like really helped like spark that in you and said, hey, continue to pursue this. This is something that you can tell you have an interest in or you're passionate about.
Yeah, not in a literal sense. That said, if I could point my finger towards two people in my life, my mom
Mhm.
certainly, and probably even my dad to a lesser degree, but both of them and my entire family, like we're very, chatty and inquisitive. We love talking to people and asking questions and telling stories and all that. And I look at my mom now, she's been widowed for the last few years and she lives on her own, in Vancouver and through a pandemic. And every day she's like out and going to a different cafe and going for her walk and talking to people on the seawall and asking, meeting people in different local businesses. And she takes all of these pictures and she shares them and she loves finding new recipes. And like, I think that really shadows the way that I am as well. Like, she's just like, yeah, like, why not have fun? Why not, have a conversation? There's so much to discover. So I think part of it is innate in the sense that like, that was my upbringing.
Right.
Um, I feel really grateful for my partnership with my husband because I think him and I have both cultivated a lot of awareness around, this curiosity piece. And I think a lot of it also is rooted in having gratitude and appreciation. And the two of us have been very intentional about how we've cultivated our life and our partnership and our individual careers. And so it's almost like we feed off of each other. He always finds it funny because we'll go to a party or something and he'll meet somebody and they say that they do something like, I don't know, let's say they work at the tax office in Germany, which you might think like that's kind of a dry, boring job. Well, my husband's like, oh my God, you work at like the Finanzamt here in Germany. Like, well, what is that like? And what do you do? And I actually have a question. I'm like, how do you determine that? And are you allowed to do this and this and this? And he's actually said he would love to have a podcast where he talks to people who have like any kind of job. Like, you're a carpenter, you collect garbage, you work at the
Right.
tax department. Like, he's curious about that. And he said it's always interesting because he'll meet people and ask them these questions. And oftentimes it's like these very brief, point blank answers. And he's like, no, I don't know if they can't explain it to me what they do. I don't know if maybe they don't want to talk about it. I don't know if maybe they think I don't care, but he really has that interest. And on the flip side, he always finds it a little funny that people don't want to inquire further with him. So
Right.
I think, again, like both of us, we kind of move throughout the world together with this inquisitive, curious style. So
I love it. Well, and just how you're talking about your husband's kind of like the backdrop to Three Uniques, because that's really what essentially I do is I talk to people from a wide gamut of professions and interests and industries. And but at the end of the day, as human beings, we have something in common. Like there's these unique skills, abilities, experiences. They could be also different, but we all have them. And so that's what, this podcast is there to do, is to help people showcase those things. And then maybe be a little bit more inquisitive about, yeah, like I do this sometimes, like on the weekends with a certain group of people. But if I was to able to do this with more people my whole life and show it in different areas, how much more fulfilled and aligned I would be around my uniques. So
100%. Yeah, no, I agree. I think like bringing these things to awareness in our mind allows us to really focus in it and on it and double down on it. And usually the things that make us unique are also things that we enjoy and that we're good at. And like, what better things to build in as the foundation for whether it's a relationship, whether it's your business, whether it's your career. So I think it's fantastic. And I'll make sure Chris tunes into the podcast for some inspiration.
yeah, absolutely. So one of my questions for you is, as we get kind of close to the end, but just sort of thinking about it, is something that you've made an investment in could be in yourself, it could be a thing, but over the last couple of years, and it's really paid off.
Yeah. I would say my health.
Okay.
I've always been quite health oriented. And yet, interestingly, specifically when it comes to being physically active, I've always had a bit of a complex in that area because I wasn't a naturally athletic child. I didn't really pursue sports. I had a very, very, type A Ironman triathlete, black belt in karate father. So I felt like anything I did, and this wasn't a pressure he directly put on me, but I felt like whatever I dabbled in wasn't really legit.
Mhm.
So I've invested in so on the athletic sports side of health, showing myself that I can and am capable of so much more than I ever thought. Mostly in the arena of my favorite hobby, which is hiking, as we've talked about. And actually, this past year, I did a 125-kilometer 9-day hike in the Dolomites.
Wow.
Um, Here in most of Europe, when you hike, you don't camp, but you stay at like alms or hospitality huts and that sort of thing. So you're carrying a heavy pack, but fortunately, I didn't have to carry 9 days worth of food. But It was actually me who instigated it. I said to my husband, we've done a
Mhm.
few day hikes of about 50 kilometers, but I really had about 100K in my mind as a nice distance. And
That's a nice distance. Sorry. I just
yeah,
find
yeah, it's nice. It sounds good, right? And we ended up like, don't ask me how we did 25% more, but um, we did that. And it's inspired me. And I think it's something that will and has lent itself to many areas of my life.
Mhm.
Um, on a more general health front, I've had a couple of chronic sort of health issues, one of which is I was actually diagnosed with endometriosis last spring,
Okay.
which for people, either yourself, Brenda, but people who are listening who don't know what endometriosis is it's when tissue that is similar to the tissue in the uterus grows in other parts of the body,
Mhm.
typically pelvic cavity. It can be on the bowels, the bladder. It can be found as in body parts as far away as like the diaphragm, the lungs, etc.
Right.
Fortunately, the endometriosis they found was not too extensively widespread, but it was causing years and years of really chronic pain and discomfort and a lot of issues for me. Last year, 2021, I was like, enough is enough. I can't do this. I can't live like this anymore. And I was very adamant about finding changes for that. And I was fortunate to get a procedure and following surgery to confirm that. It's still something I'm working through. Like I still have some like recurring bouts of pain and flare ups, but for me, my health and feeling good in my body it's really the foundation for my life.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting having had some chronic pain stuff coming up this past week. It's showed me like if I don't feel good, it's been so hard to show up and operate in my business. So
Yeah.
that investment is one I continue to make, and I know it will continue to reap further rewards.
I love that because I think as humans we can take on lots of things and we can persevere, and it kind of goes back to your example of you could look at the world as being a big hot mess or that there's a ton of beauty in the world. So it's like the same thing even with your health and your body. It's like I could push through it. I could live with this for years and persevere and hack it out. Or I could do something about it and really just invest in my body and take care of it because it's going to be around for a while, and why not enjoy it versus
Yeah,
living with pain, right? And trying to cope
yeah,
with pain.
100%. Yeah, and it's some. I don't want to say it's easier to live with pain, but it can be very, very frustrating navigating all of our respective healthcare systems. And I
Right.
think well, I know specifically where it concerns women's health, is there is a lack of support
Mhm.
and resources. But I'm fortunate to have pursued and pushed through long enough that I found someone who was willing to say, yeah, this isn't normal, we need to look at what's going on here. So I'm grateful for having done that.
That's good. That's great. And my last question for you, Keltie, is if I was to give you a billboard and you could have it anywhere in the world, what would it say and where would you want it to be?
So sidebar, whenever, I don't know if you listen to like Oprah's Super Soul podcast, but she always has these great
Yeah.
questions at the end,
Yeah.
and I always think, are guests prepped on these questions or do they have to answer spontaneously? And if this podcast is any indicator, it's spontaneous. It's hard not to say that it would just be, a simple white background with big letters that say, be kind, in the middle of, I don't know, Times Square or
Yeah.
somewhere.
That could be a good one. And like
Because,
you're a marketing person at heart, right? So it's like, that
yeah,
could be, go for it.
yeah, not because, the US is the center of the universe, but only because it's obviously like central to a lot of our media and that. But
Right.
no, it would probably have to be something a little bit more, to spark people's imaginations. And I don't want to say that would be like inflammatory, but it would need to be something that would step outside of the norm. So, um, maybe it would say, you do you, boo. Because, I also think so many of us, and this stems back to the work that I do and really the passion that I have for it, but so many of us are living our lives in accordance with what we think we should be doing, what we see other people doing. I think, unfortunately, in most cases, that's without even questioning it. It's like, well, that's just what you do. That's what, you become an adult and you get the job, get the house, you get the partner, you have the kids. And okay, this is what it would say. It would say, question everything. Right. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you are that you're like pessimist or that you're a cynic. But I think we just need to question more. We need to question each other. We need to question our governments. We need to question the lives that we're living. And I think if people had more awareness and more intention,
Hmm.
we would be living in a different world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Keltie. It's been great getting to know you more and hearing about your three uniques and sharing about your husband and just like the things, the adventures that you guys are on. So I really appreciate you taking your time out today to be with
Well,
us.
thank you for having me, and hopefully we can fundraise for my 3 billboards. Be kind, you do you, boo, and question everything.
That's right. I was like, one billboard, but you took it to three. That's
Yeah,
okay.
well, if you don't ask, you won't get. So
Yeah,
thank you
absolutely.
so much for having me, Brenda.
Thank you. And for everyone listening, as I always say, there's 7.8 billion people on this planet. Get out there and share your three uniques. Take care, everyone.